And this is a special one. This is a big one. And of course, one of the great rivalries from past decades in the history of college football. Oklahoma pays the return trip to Nebraska in September. We got Parker Thune on the line from OU Insider on 247 Sports. You can also catch him every weekday at noon Central Time on 94.7 The Ref. Parker, how you doing today?
Doing fantastic, Mark. Always a pleasure. How are you?
I am doing just fine. This is Greg Peterson here from Husker Online.
Nice to meet you, Parker.
Good to meet you as well, Greg.
Well, Parker, I will get things started and let Greg cut loose as well after I launch the conversation, because I get a chance to talk to Parker on a regular basis. But, let's catch the Nebraska audience up to date on the Brent Venables regime and maybe some differences between Brent Venables and Lincoln Riley and how things are being approached there in Norman.
Yeah, well, the differences between Venables and Riley, philosophically speaking, that's more of a long-term type of difference. That's not something that I'm sure is going to be as evident on a game-by-game basis in 2022. That's one of the types of things where you're going to have to see how Brent Venables constructs his roster year in and year out, how he recruits, how he conducts his program, and how he upgrades the facilities at Oklahoma. So to me, I think the philosophical differences between Venables and Riley aren't going to be as conspicuous in 2022 as I think a lot of people would like them to be. I think a lot of people would like to see a stark difference between the Oklahoma football team that we see in 2022 versus the Oklahoma football team that we saw in 2021. What I do think is interesting and probably the most compelling storyline for the Sooners in 2022 is the fact that the roster looks so different a year ago. No longer do you have Spencer Rattler. No longer do you have Caleb Williams. Jaden Hazelwood's gone. Austin Stogner's gone. Mario Williams is gone. When you take a look at a lot of these contributors on both sides of the ball for Oklahoma a year ago, a lot of those guys have transferred or made their way to the NFL. Now, what Venables did, what the Oklahoma staff did, was they brought in a whole lot of high-impact transfers, experienced guys who have played a lot of football at the FBS level, so that you're not starting from scratch as much so as you would be otherwise. If you are starting from scratch, you're at least starting with guys who have been there and done that, although Oklahoma is new digs for them.
So, Parker, in looking at Oklahoma, Nebraska, to bring that Husker flavor into the conversation. Of course, when I was growing up, this was one of the great games in college football. It's been on pause now for 12 or 13 years, aside from what we saw in Norman last year, where it was an unexpected close game, 23-16. Now the return trip to Norman. I got to think that obviously the fan boards are focused on Brent Venables. What are the additions going to look like? Dylan Gabriel led offense and all those things, and less about individual games going forward. But is there anything generated, especially considering that a 3-win Husker team that should be pretty much improved this year is the top transfer portal team in the Big Ten? The return trip is coming in September.
Yeah, people are stoked for this game, Mark. They really are. And, for me, this is going to be a really cool opportunity to go cover a game up there because I grew up in Nebraska, graduated high school there. So obviously I haven't been to a game in Memorial Stadium since I want to say 2008. Nebraska won on a bitterly cold day, 45-35 over Kansas. And the thing that sticks out to me most about that day was Ndamukong Suh caught a touchdown pass, which was a fun little coda to that game. But no, this is a rivalry where you look at the narrative arc of college football history, Mark. There was a time for probably about a quarter century where you can make the argument that this was the biggest rivalry in college football. There was no rivalry on a year in, year out basis that meant as much as Oklahoma versus Nebraska, because both of these teams perennially were among the elites of college football. They were the heavy hitters in contention for national championships. You think back to the days of Barry Switzer and the days of Tom Osborne at Oklahoma and Nebraska, respectively. This is a rivalry that a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle just miss. And the game last year in Norman was a little bit anticlimactic, all things considered. Neither team played especially well. Oklahoma ended up preserving a 23-16 victory. And now as you look ahead to this year, There's a significant contingent of Sooner fans that are going to make the trek up to Lincoln. You know, you think about the older demographic of the Oklahoma fan base. A lot of them are well acquainted with making that trip. And despite the hiatus, they're pumped about the opportunity to watch this rivalry be renewed at Memorial Stadium. I was pretty bummed to find out last week that apparently there's a helium shortage, and so Nebraska isn't doing the red balloons thing anymore. It's gosh, that's one of the great traditions in college football for my money. So bummed that won't be a part of it. But with so much history and so much at stake between these two teams, obviously Scott Frost at Nebraska trying to hold on to his job after a pretty ho-hum tenure thus far, and Brent Venables in what will be his first road game as Oklahoma's head coach, trying to essentially find that launch pad to get his team in contention early and generate some buzz as a potential Big 12 championship contender. This is a game that a lot of folks are looking forward to on September 17th. And I think for many, the game that they are most looking forward to, in fact, over the course of this 2022 season.
Interesting. All right, then. Looks like Parker's taking over the show, so I'm going to take the rest of the night off there, guys.
No, it is time for you to jump in.
No, hey, you know what? I think it's going to be great to see Oklahoma fans, walking around outside the stadium before game time and having them in the stands again. I mean, obviously, like Parker, I mean, I grew up here too, probably a little bit older than Parker is, but yeah. So I grew up with this rivalry as well, and I agree. In my mind, it's always been the rivalry in college football. You can say what you want about all those old school rivalries, your Michigan, Ohio State, your Notre Dame, USC. I mean, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Nebraska, Oklahoma always had a special flavor. And I think last year going into that game too, that nobody gave Nebraska much of a shooter's chance to stand up to OU. And like we just talked about, that it was a pretty close game. Went right down to the wire pretty much. So, I think that instilled a little bit of confidence in Nebraska and the Nebraska fan base as well. And we'll see what it's two teams renewing an old rivalry, but it's two teams that honestly, we don't even know what they're going to look like when they take the field at this point. Lots of different faces on both sides of the rivalry here. And Nebraska also has a lot of new coaches, not the head coach, but, a lot of new coaches on the offensive side of the ball too. So that's what sticks out in my mind is that I think it's two unknowns at this point right now. Obviously, I think that, not covering Oklahoma like Parker does, just kind of the national perspective is I think most people think Oklahoma is going to be down this year. But listening to Parker, it doesn't sound that way to me. So I think it's going to be an exciting matchup. And obviously, I've got this one circled. I'm waiting for this game more than I am going over to Ireland for Northwestern to start the year.
I think down is the lower half of the top 10. I think
right. I mean, a couple of games,
sure.
It's a lost column that usually wouldn't be there is what I'm calling down.
So naturally on our Nebraska show with Parker coming in to set us up for Oklahoma, Nebraska on September 17th, our first question comes in from a Notre Dame fan, of course, D-Rock Irish.
We love him, though.
Commenting here that with Dillon Gabriel being the starting quarterback, but it being a bit thin behind him, of course, they get some help in recent weeks via Pittsburgh. Parker, just discuss Dillon Gabriel, what he brings to the table, and then the backup quarterback situation as it stands right now.
Yeah, so it's a phenomenal point there, and I think that's the overarching concern, the preeminent concern for a lot of Sooner fans heading into the 2022 season is what happens if, knock on wood, Dillon Gabriel goes down with an injury? Because you look at what Gabriel has done, started from the jump as a true freshman at UCF, has been the starter there for 2.5 seasons, had his 2021 season cut short due to a shoulder injury. But for the most part, he's been one of the most productive quarterbacks in the country very quietly over the last couple of years, 70-14 touchdown interception ratio. So Oklahoma has a lot of confidence in Dillon Gabriel to be the guy. But if you look at the quarterback room behind him, there are 3 additional scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. None of them are particularly experienced. You're looking at Davis Bevel, the transfer from Pittsburgh, who got some decent run in the Peach Bowl while Kenny Pickett I suppose he opted out. So that's the reason you saw a little bit of Davis Bevel in the Peach Bowl, but that's the most action he's seen across his 3 years at the collegiate level. The Sooners bring in a true freshman, Nick Evers, 4-star signee out of Flower Mound, Texas. It was a guy that was among the top 10 quarterback prospects in the class of 2022. A lot of talent, big arm, lightning quick release. But for those that watched Oklahoma's spring game, it was very evident that Evers is still adjusting to the pace of the collegiate game and still a work in progress when it comes to going through his progressions and being able to scan the field. And then the Sooners most recently brought in a guy that has just the best name in all of college football, General Booty, the transfer from Tyler Junior College. And if you take a look at his high school tape and what he was able to do at Tyler in his lone season on the JUCO circuit, he was actually the nation's leading passer across the JUCO ranks. He's a guy that has a lot of talent, was somewhat under-recruited, and I would say just looking at the room as things stand, there's a very good chance that he's your QB2 heading into the season. But between Bevel, Evers, and Booty, you have 3 guys that are capable, sure, but unproven. And so that is kind of the doomsday scenario for Oklahoma. If Dylan Gabriel goes down, then one way or another, regardless of who QB2 is, it's somebody that quite simply hasn't played a whole lot of college football or any college football yet.
Parker, we hear the ire come out from the fan base here with Nebraska. And as you well know, we've got our Oklahoma channel as well. When Fox, even though it's been much promoted for a few years now, that they are moving that prime game to the noon slot Eastern time, which becomes 11 a.m. Central time, that a lot of people don't like that. But that is where it's set. So if you heard too much from the fan base regarding the kickoff time.
Yeah, the reality, Mark, is that nobody really loves 11 a.m. kickoffs, particularly for a rivalry game like this. And I understand that Fox has the broadcast rights and the 11 a.m. window is kind of their prime time window. But this was an 11 a.m. kickoff last year. It's going to be an 11 a.m. kickoff this year. I think a lot of folks on both the Oklahoma side and the Nebraska side were hoping that, given the history between these two teams, it was going to commandeer a little bit more respect and maybe at the very least get an afternoon kick time. But it is what it is. At the end of the day, both these programs are going to play a football game on September 17th. I'm not convinced anybody in either locker room is concerned about when it's happening. They're just concerned about going out there and getting a win. So I understand it's not the greatest draw for the fans, and maybe it complicates travel a little bit more where you're having to get in on Friday night as opposed to being able to make the road trip on Saturday morning. But no, that's the price you pay for college football at times. And with as magnificent as this rivalry has been over the years and how excited both of these fan bases are to watch them hit the field at Memorial Stadium, I think it'll all be water under the bridge by the time September rolls around.
Question for both of you. On the recruiting front, I got to think in the heyday of the 70s through 90s into the 2000s. And of course, these two teams played in the final 2 Big 12 championship games in which Nebraska was part of the conference, that they were knocking heads on the recruiting trail on a regular basis. Now here in the last 5+ years, you see Oklahoma recruiting classes in the top 5 to 10 in the nation, Nebraska more in the low teens to 25 range. Has the recruiting landscape changed because of Nebraska's move to the Big Ten? How do you both see that?
I would say, Greg, you're probably more qualified to answer that question up front than I am. So why don't you go ahead?
Well, first off, I wanted to kind of backtrack a little bit on what Parker was talking about with the kickoff time. Quite frankly, it punishes Nebraska in my mind, because you make an 11 a.m. kickoff, which makes it a pain in the butt to get official visitors on campus for that game when you're flying them in from the East Coast or wherever they're coming from. So, yeah, Nebraska never wants to play a home game especially with the marquee matchup that they have on their schedule as a home game during the year, and the biggest rival they've ever had. Obviously, you would love to have that as a 7 o'clock kickoff, or at least a 2:30. I mean, those are your 2 time slots that you covet. The Fox Big Noon Saturday thing is garbage in my mind. But yeah, they own the rights to it, so it's their call. But especially when Nebraska is trying to get a foothold against programs like Oklahoma that have a recruiting edge, this is like a slap in the face, if you ask me. So yeah, I'm totally upset with the kickoff time, because we were hoping. I mean, most of us thought it was going to be the primetime matchup that night. But oh well, it is what it is. So yeah, I went off on my tirade there, but well, I forget the recruiting question. What you asked?
If I'm going to play Fox executive, Greg, I would tell you that is our primetime matchup. We've been telling you that for 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah, you got to wake everybody up at the butt crack of dawn to get ready for the game. So yeah, we don't like it around here, and I know Oklahoma fans don't like it either. But you know what? Hey, we just like Parker said, you got to, they're gonna suit up, they're gonna play. It's not going to affect anybody watching the game. It's not going to affect the attendance in the stadium. The players don't give a crap themselves, but I'm telling you right now, the Nebraska coaches do, because obviously you mark that on your calendar as probably your biggest recruiting weekend of the year. I mean, because you don't have Ohio State coming in this year. So yeah, you looked at that Oklahoma game when the schedule comes out and said, hey, this is what we target to get all those top recruits in that, you used to go head to head against Oklahoma, and you still do. But yeah, that's my biggest hang up on it, is that, they think about TV and all this, and they don't think about the long range of the benefits and, how it affects a program. So, yeah. I think since the move to the Big Ten, though, recruiting-wise, Nebraska really doesn't recruit. I mean, they still recruit a lot of the players Oklahoma does, but not to the extent that they used to, because Nebraska, while in the Big 12, recruited Texas very heavily. They don't do that anymore, just for the fact that it's harder to get Texas kids to come to Nebraska. Now, you're still going to get a handful of them every year, but it's just a lot harder to get them to come to Nebraska when they don't play, in the state. Because you used to play, every year you'd play at least 2 games in the state of Texas. So those kids could come home and it felt real to them. Now it's a little bit different. There's different dynamics, different conference, different dynamics on people that you recruit. So it really, you're always going to see Nebraska go head-to-head with Oklahoma on recruits from around this region. Kids from Kansas, kids from Oklahoma. Nebraska gets a good share of kids from Oklahoma year in and year out. Those kids that get, they feel like they get slighted by Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, and Nebraska is going to offer out there, hey, it's not very far away. I can drive there. My family can drive down and see me play. So that's always going to be there, no matter what conference either team is in. But yeah, it's just not the same head-to-head that it used to be when you're going after the same caliber recruits. I mean, you go back to Buki. I mean, Buki Radley-Hiles was a guy that was committed to Nebraska, ended up going to Oklahoma. But that's the kind of dynamic you used to have recruiting these 2 schools. Nowadays, last 3 or 4 years, it's not been like that. You're not getting the big decision kids. I think it's more Nebraska gets kids from Oklahoma that don't have Oklahoma offers, and vice versa, with Oklahoma kind of targeting different types of athletes than Nebraska does in the recruiting process these days.
Parker Thune's on the line from OU Insider 247 Sports. You can also catch him on his show weekdays on 94.7 The Ref. Parker, question coming in concerning from Moonbot concerning Oklahoma's linebacking core and some assessment there.
So as far as the linebackers at Oklahoma, is there any particular question they're in, or just kind of an overview?
Just said, how does, let's see, I've lost track of it, but it was pretty much just, how do the OU linebackers look?
Yeah, so obviously the Sooners lose Brian Asamoah, who was an early third-round pick in the NFL draft to the Minnesota Vikings. He is the one that needs to be replaced in that linebacker core. The good news for Oklahoma is that Danny Stutzman blossomed as a true freshman a year ago, 3-star recruit out of Winter Garden, Florida, entered with pretty minimal expectations for year one, but immediately emerged even before the season began throughout fall camp as one of the guys that was going to make his name known at the linebacker position and was going to force his way onto the field one way or another. He started the season off really hot, was the leading tackler for the team through 2 games before dislocating his elbow, which forced him to miss the ensuing 3 games. So that kind of sidelined his campaign. Asamoah was easily the Sooners' best linebacker a season ago, and that was reflected in the draft stock that you saw for him in the 2022 NFL draft. But as far as the linebackers are concerned, to me, Stutzman is going to be the meat and potatoes of that linebacking core. He's the guy, and I've heard from people close to the team, just having conversations about the outlook of the defense as a whole, that Stutzman might be pound for pound the best player on Oklahoma's entire defense. And I think if you watched him play last year, you could see that potential kind of starting to materialize. So especially with the addition of new strength coach Jerry Schmidt, who is revered across the industry, Stutzman's one of those guys that stands to benefit from the new S&C regimen and should be primed for at least 100 tackles this season. Outside of Stutzman, Deshaun White is a 5th-year senior and 3-year starter coming back. TD Roof, the son of new defensive coordinator Ted Roof, transferred in from Appalachian State and is a 6th-year senior. He's a guy that, while diminutive, only about 5'11", 230 pounds, is a guy that emerged throughout the spring as somebody that just gets it and knows where to be on the field, obviously has that experience having played at the Power 5 level with Georgia Tech as well as with Appalachian State. So he's a guy that should get some snaps this fall as well. Stutzman, TD Roof, Deshaun White, and then everybody is immensely excited about incoming true freshman Jaron Kanik, 4-star signee out of the state of Kansas, who was going to play for Brent Venables at Clemson until Venables took the head coaching job at Oklahoma, at which point Kanik followed him. This kid might be the freakiest athlete on the entire depth chart. In winter testing periods, he ran a 4.4 in the 40-yard dash and bench pressed 275 pounds 12 times as an incoming early enrollee freshman. So that gives you an idea of the type of athletic ability that he has. Also has a 40-inch vertical jump, in just among the freakiest football players you will ever see at that age. So Sooner fans and the coaching staff alike, very, very excited about his potential. So it becomes a question of who emerges alongside Stutzman, whether that is Deshaun White, whether that is TD Roof, Kanik, or David Agwebu, another returner who has some starting experience.
Greg, anything else for Parker?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. All righty. Very, very good.
Where'd you go to high school here?
Oh, man, I don't know if you've ever even heard of it. A little high school in Omaha up on 156th and Fort called Concordia.
Oh, sure. Of course. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. I graduated with 85 people. So there you go.
Okay. I'm a Lincoln East guy. So
okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Malachi Coleman.
You got it. Yeah. He's a stud.
I'm sure he is indeed a stud.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen some of the video on him. He's taking his official visit this weekend here in Lincoln for Friday Night Lights. So
yeah, I know Oklahoma's getting him for an unofficial on the 10th and are hoping to bring him back around for an OV. I'm not entirely sure whether that'll happen or not. I know he's got a lot of interest right now.
I went and watched him last week in state track, and he was the favorite in the 100 and the 200, and he ended up second in both, and wasn't happy. Was not happy at all. So,
no.
But for a 6'6" guy that can run the 100 and 200, he's a pretty special freak of an athlete right there as well. So.
Yeah, and as he adds weight, should only get better. Should be able to be a high-end contributor at the next level as either a tight end or an outside linebacker. So Yeah, really excited about him. And
outside linebackers is spot. Yep.
Yeah, he's got a chance to be one of the best that has come through the Cornhusker State in a long time.
Absolutely. And the best ever from my alma mater. I'll throw that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Never seen a guy like that at my old school before.
No doubt.
Parker, some of us appreciate your ode to Andre Dawson, Gary Carter, Tim Raines, and so forth, where they're with the Montreal Expo. So thank you for that as well.
Absolutely.